Hey there, and welcome back to the Prep Comms Podcast. I'm Caleb Nelson, K4CDN, your family radio guy, and today we're getting into episode number 2 of our MURS radio mini-series. And before we go any further, I got to say thank you, because after episode 1 of the mini-series dropped, I heard from a bunch of you guys, most especially on YouTube, which is really odd because it's just a static image with the podcast playing in the background. So if you're taking this in via YouTube, just know that we're on Spotify and all of the podcast players if you'd rather pick it up there. But thank you. I appreciate you guys, especially all of your comments. It was crazy. I'm talking like a 600 times interactivity compared to the previous episode. So what I'm learning from you guys is that you like it there, even though it's just a static image with a podcast playing in the background. And heard from a lot of you guys, you're actually using this radio service and it's working for you, so that's cool. So I want to just break down some of the responses I got through the different platforms and heard from folks. So again, one, thank you very much. MURS is a great radio service. We've been using it here for years and love it. One guy in the mountains of southwest Pennsylvania commented that he and his buddies, who are already licensed ham and GMRS users, still use MURS when they want a clean, long-haul coverage through the hills and the foliage. He compares it to how 2 meters works like MURS, which works like the 1.25 meter band, which is 220 megahertz, in the penetration of the foliage, the trees, the mountains, and whatever. So like the rural settings, the hills and whatnot there in southwest PA. Someone else reminded another listener that power wasn't really the issue, that the problem there. He states that from the top of Grandfather Mountain in North Carolina, which is, a beautiful place if you've never seen it, he made a simplex contact over 100 miles away. And during that contact, he kept dialing down the power of his radio to the point of 200 milliwatts, not 200 watts, 200 milliwatts. And it's not because anything fancy. He was just that high. He had a good atmosphere, and the operating position he had was pretty amazing. 200 milliwatts, 100 mile contact. That was on ham radio, but it's the VHF ham radio, which is just a few megahertz difference than MURS. But it's just an example of how well VHF works, especially line of sight and height above average terrain. I had a lot of folks from Colorado, Oregon, and even Utah all say the same thing. They monitor MURS, they use MURS, but they never hear anything on it. And they almost seem disappointed that they didn't hear someone on it. But the thing about MURS, and the reason I'm sharing it in the fashion I'm sharing it in on this program, is the fact that it is so quiet, because silence is an opportunity, especially if you're looking for a backup or even a primary radio service for you and your family to use if something were to go bad, right? So this is the Prep Comms Podcast. We talk that direction. And so if you're looking to have conversation with someone that you don't know, like you want to make radio friends, and I say that with air quotes, MURS is not where you'll find your radio friends, okay? If you want that, we're going to talk about GMRS later. We've already talked about CB radio, and we'll eventually get to ham radio. In those three services, they're kind of built for communication with strangers or people that you don't know yet or have like a personal relationship with at this point. Whereas MURS has been given to the public, which was a former business service. So, you don't go to Walmart and find these radios on the shelves. You have to kind of like get specifically and hunt for them. You can buy them off Amazon. We've got them all in the store. But the point is, it's not a service that you're going to pick up a radio for and make new friends. You're not going to really get on this and talk to someone across town about what's going on with the weather, because MURS is just sitting out there very quiet. And again, that's why it's so strategically, in my opinion, important to have, if you're a prepper, if you're looking for an alternate means of communication for you and your family. It's quiet, and there's power in the quiet. You don't have to compete with anybody else. So take that in. MURS is not a conversational radio service, unless you and your family have it. Well, then, yeah, you talk to your mom, you talk to your kids, you talk to your grandma, whatever. But you're not going to pick up a MURS radio and be, talking to new buddies that you haven't made yet. I hope I'm making that case or that understanding properly, because I don't want you to think that, everybody's just sitting here waiting to talk to you on MURS, and more than likely they're not. And that's a really good thing if you're using this service as the way we're talking about it. I did get some information, and I forgot to mention this in the first episode, dog tracking collars. So I live way down in the country. We've talked about that 100 times. And years ago, for about 6 to 9 months in the fall, even through the winter, and then it broke for a little while and came back, when we would have our MURS base station on for our driveway alert and the barn alert, in the evenings, almost every other or every third evening, we would have these, what sounded like to me as APRS packets. So it was just a bump, squelch, this weird digital sound. And I couldn't for the life of me figure out where this was coming from. I thought maybe I'm getting, interference from a really close APRS node, but I checked all the maps, and I know I may be talking over some of your heads, but here's the deal. What it was there were guys with their hunting dogs down here in the country with their tracking collars on, and that was what I was hearing. And it took me a while to figure it out. So anyway, driveway alerts, dog collars, telemetry, you may hear some digital stuff there. There's telemetry. We had a conversation on YouTube in the comments about, can you do digital or not? It's very gray, and because of the shade of gray that it is, I'm going to say that, yeah, if you want to do digital on MURS, like telemetry, water level alerts or driveway alarms, whatever, that's pretty cut and dry. The other is very gray, so I'm going to just leave it on your own there. I don't know that we'll talk about that. We may talk about it in a future show, but right now, just to save the argument, it's gray. If you like gray, take off. Anyway, so today I want to talk about what you can actually expect for real-world performance from MURS radios. Now, if you have a walkie-talkie with a little short antenna, you can talk across your yard. You can probably talk to your neighbor, maybe a couple of neighbors down around your neighborhood. It just depends, again, on where you are and how you're situated, where you live, or where you anticipate using it. But it's like anything. We've watched these movies on television and at the theater, and you see these guys with these walkie-talkies, and they're talking across the world and all this, and the consumer has a misunderstanding of the reality of physics in regards to radio signals, and we've talked about that in the past. We don't have to rehash it now, but the thing is, you're only going to go as far as your antenna will transmit and receive. So a lot of people want to know, how far can I talk? Well, does it really matter if the guy on the other end can't hear you because he is compromised with his antennas? So it's an argument as old as time. And I had to learn these things, having started out with CB radio way back in the 1900s, and thought that just needed more power. If I had more power, I could do more. But the reality is that you need an antenna that really outperforms your power, because that is where your power's at or lost. So today, let's talk about some of that. So we're going to talk about antennas, your coax, your terrain, your height above average terrain, and why all of that matters for MURS and all radio systems, more than how much power you can get out. Because you're going to hear people say, I don't want to do MURS because I can do 50 watts and repeaters on GMRS. You sure can. We'll talk about that later. But we're talking about MURS. It is relegated to just 2 watts of output power. You're not going to get, you can find, rigs from China that you can open up and do whatever you want to with, but legally, which we like to talk in those bounds here, the MURS output power is 2 watts. Okay. And we talked about the antenna height, maximum 60 feet or 20 feet above whatever you have it attached to. Those all make a big difference in how you're going to perform. But like any other radio service, it's your antenna that's going to make or break the transmitting and receiving range of your system. So if you take your 2 watt MURS radio, which is VHF, let's say 151.820 megahertz, and you have a great antenna, you've got it mounted up high, you've used really great coax cable, it will perform a 10-watt radio with a piece of crap antenna connected to, cheap coax cable. It will. And people have a hard time with that. Well, I have a 50-watt radio, and you've got it connected to a piece of tinfoil on a TV antenna. It's not going to perform like an antenna tuned for that service, mounted properly with good feed lines. So when people ask me, what can I really expect with MURS? And the answer is, it depends. And it all depends on how you built your system. System meaning, how did you build the transmitting and receiving aspect of your MURS radio system? It's all about antennas because, like I've said, all the way back to maybe episode 1 or 2 of this whole program here, you fight your battles, win and lose your battles with your antenna. They're all a compromise, but it depends on how you lean. It depends on the results you get. So if you're trying to go between like your house and your barn, or maybe around your property, you've got 50, 100 acres, somewhere in there. Maybe you want to talk between cars, on a convoy, or maybe you're on a church, team there that's parking cars or a parking service, something like that. A lot of that can be done with just walkie-talkies with a good antenna. Now, a lot of times you'll find that the antennas that come with a walkie-talkie, they're not that great. And an aftermarket antenna always comes in handy. It can always, depending on the one you buy, sometimes you can just buy another piece of junk, but just check the show notes. We'll have some good antenna options in there for you. Here's the thing. Your antenna makes all the difference in the world, whether it's the base station antenna, whether it's your car-mounted antenna, or if it's the antenna directly into your walkie-talkie or handy-talkie. That's going to make or break. So I have an affinity for Ed Fong's antenna. And Ed is a guy who I've had on my Ham Radio 360 podcast years ago. He makes antennas. He utilizes, actually his physics students build these and test these antennas that they sell. And then I think at the end of the year, they have a big party in the class for the antenna money they made. Ed's out in California. He makes a great antenna for ham radio, a couple of different brands. He makes a roll-up. He makes one that goes inside of a piece of PVC pipe that you can mount outside like a base station. And he's got one that works for MURS and GMRS both. I'll link it in the show notes, but Ed does a great job with those. Another one that I found, and here's the thing, so we're talking MURS antennas. There's not a lot out there on the market for MURS radio antennas. You got to get specific, and more than likely you're going to wind up with a commercial antenna, which will, when you put commercial in front of something, that means the government's probably the target audience for that. So it's going to be, 7 to 10 times what, an antenna made for us, the general populace, is what I'm trying to say. So I found one, and jpoleantenna.com. And he's got a YouTube channel, and he sells all different sorts of antennas, but he makes them in the J-pole configuration out of copper tubing. And I think it would be worth a look, really, if you're wanting a nice-looking antenna that would kind of blend in to maybe, Art Deco style in your neighborhood. Check out jpole-antenna.com. I'm going to show note this stuff, so it's a really good one. It's tuned for the specific frequency for MURS. Centerfire outdoor dipole. So Centerfire is a company that I've dealt with numerous times. I've got their base station scanner antennas and some of their quarter wave VHF antennas as well. Really low cost. They make a dipole, which is kind of made for scanning in the frequency band that MURS is in, and you can take that and actually use it with MURS radios transmitting in that frequency. It's really lightweight, not hard to put up or anything like that. These will all be in the show notes. I'm just trying to give you some ideas of some antennas, because this is what makes or breaks your MURS radio system. All right, so a Yagi antenna is a directional antenna, and it's spelled Y-A-G-I. We pronounce it Yagi. You might hear someone say Yagi, and I guess that would be not from South Carolina, but it's a directional antenna, and it looks almost like a television antenna turned on its side. So if you want to talk a good ways, let's say if I wanted to set up a station here to talk to my mother-in-law 7 or 8 miles away, a Yagi antenna would work really well. Now, it doesn't mean you just throw it up in the air because it's directional. You have to point it to where specifically you're trying to talk to. And just think of a laser. So if you have a flashlight with a really broad throw, you can light up your whole yard. And that's great. That's you're getting light everywhere, but it's not really specific and it's kind of diluted. But you pull it in and you do a much more focused beam. You're looking directly at an area, and all that light energy goes to that area. The same way with the Yagi antenna, wherever it's pointing, all the energy is going that direction. So I could go to my mother-in-law's house and put up a Yagi antenna, aim it back this way, and put one up here and aim it towards her, and tune those things directly to each other, and it would be, point to point, very, very good use of the energy coming out of the antenna, and it would greatly increase your range. But you have to have someone on the other end, and of course you have to be aimed in their direction. So that works for sure. Here's one of the things that'll hurt everything we just talked about, and that is cheap coax cable. And if you're going to run like 50 feet or less, I always use RG8X. It's a really inexpensive, really small ham radio. It's used for CB. You can use it for anything, actually. And because you're using less than 50 plus or so feet, you're not going to have a lot of loss in the cable. So it's perfect. It will work great for VHF at about 50 feet. Anything more, I would probably go with an LMR type 400 cable. It's going to be a lot bigger, comparatively speaking. It's probably going to cost a lot more, comparatively speaking. It's stiffer, it's heavier, but it will drastically reduce any signal loss. So let's say RG8X is a little skinny cable, and let's pretend it's a water pipe. There's not but so much water that can go through there. Well, at 50 feet, that's not really a big deal. But if you're a fire truck taking water from a hydrant 1,000 feet away, if you take a 2.5-inch hose, you're going to get a certain amount of water from the hydrant to the fire truck. But if you increase the size of that hose to like a 5-inch LDH, you will be able to get a lot more water through there. And not just because the pipe is bigger, but because there's less friction loss. And I know that's kind of getting out there on the limb, but I grew up in the fire service, so it just works that way in my mind. So think it this way. If you're using 50 feet or less on VHF, which is MURS, okay, so we're talking MURS, VHF, 150 megahertz, RG8X will work fine. This will be in the show notes. If you're going to run out of your house and then maybe up an antenna tower and whatever, and you're going to have more than 50 feet, say 75 to 100 feet in use, I would go with an LMR 400 type cable. That's just going to allow your signal to get up to the antenna and get out of the antenna and back to you a lot easier with less, air quotes, friction loss. Okay, so we'll have this in the show notes. I know that's kind of out there for some of you and you're just like, your head's exploded. I just want to be able to talk. I understand, and I'm trying to make it easy, but at the same time, trying to make it make sense to make it easy for you. So I have had here on the farm the Dakota alert system. It's worked great, man. I've used J-pole antennas. I've used roll-up wire antennas. I've used just handheld antennas. And for what we're doing, we started with 30 acres. I'm down to about 13 now. But, even back in the day, we've got a lot of foliage here, and VHF just punches through. It works. So, if you plan on using it just around your farm, your walkie-talkies may do it. If you have a radio sitting, let's say, in the kitchen, and you hope to hear your kids in the yard when they're playing on the back 40, you may want to put a base station antenna in. And you don't have to get crazy with it. These low-cost antenna options we've talked about earlier, they'll do the job just fine. And you'll have a good solid connection there for a couple of miles with that. So if you're a parking lot church team, or maybe you work in that industry, or you're doing something like that, you may want to consider adding an antenna to your car, and then just use your handy-talkie or your walkie-talkie connected to that antenna, especially if you're like going on a trip with somebody. It's real easy. It's not hard to do. They make those. And we'll show note them for you. How about that? Base station antennas, they're in the show notes. They're in the Amazon store, the affiliate store. Thank you for shopping there. And there's a couple of them. I found one that's a very expensive, comparatively speaking, option, about $250. It works on MURS and GMRS, but it's about 12 or 15 feet tall, which would be a banger. You know what I'm saying? So if you've got something that needs that sort of installation, I'll try to remember to put that in the show notes as well. Look, here's another thing I got to remind you of. MURS is wide open for anybody in the United States to use. So if you guys get on there, you and your kids or you and your wife, and you're talking about stuff that you don't want anybody else to hear about, don't use MURS. It's not secure. It's not private. You can set it up so you don't hear anyone else talking, but that doesn't mean they can't hear you. There's no way to generate privacy on this frequency legally. All right. And you just need to know that. The great thing about it, though, is that because it's so underused and underappreciated, you're kind of got some privacy built in there anyway. I'm not saying don't use it. Just know what you're using and don't expect if your neighbor's nosy and has a scanner running and he's scanning frequencies and hears you guys, well, he's going to hear what you're saying. So the majority of these family type radio services in the U.S. are wide open to be monitored so people can hear you. If you need a private encrypted solution, we can help you with that, but it's a little more in-depth than what we've been talking about so far, and we're going to get to that. I just want you to know it's a great service. MURS is awesome. We've used it for years. I've never worried about anyone hearing me because I haven't said anything that I didn't want anybody else to hear. So MURS is just something that works. So again, you don't need more power. You don't need to be any smarter than your neighbor. And we've already done the hard work here going through what does and doesn't work for you. I've got all this stuff listed again in the Amazon affiliate store and our show notes. And I've also been blogging about the MURS shows that we're releasing here. So you check us out at prepcoms.com and find everything there. Next time, we're going to be talking about Dakota alerts. We're going to kind of get into the gray area of the digital modes and why you can't use repeaters on MURS legally. It's a great service. Want to encourage you to check it out if you're looking for something quiet for you and the family to use. Again, it's been on our farm for a very long time with great results. Thank you so much for listening. I am Caleb Nelson, K4CDN, the Family Radio Guy. And don't forget, coming really soon, our brand new online course, the Family Connect System. It's our official show sponsor here, and it will be launching hopefully here really soon. Again, thank you. I appreciate you listening, commenting, sharing this stuff with your friends, and we'll be back on the next episode. Until then, God bless you. 73, y'all.